5 hours. He stood back, a smile on his face, his wings ruffled by his side, several feathers falling out and floating to the junk-covered floor. The workshop was a mess, with the floor barely visible beneath a sea of discarded items. It had taken him a while, as well as several attempts to sew up the face, but at long last he had finished. There, seated on the desk, in a slumped-over position, was his finished masterpiece. It was a pony, a mare slightly smaller in stature than himself. Her lavender coat was thin in some places, and her right foreleg was held together by a piece of dark velvet fabric. Stitches ran across her body, as well as her face. She had the mane of dark purple hair that curled and twisted around her head and neck. Wings hung limply by her side, one slightly larger than the other, both covered in feathers of various colors. She sat there, motionless upon the desk, with her head slumped forward and eyes closed. The glow of the hourglass shone from behind her, giving her a hellish halo of blood-red light. Barely able to control the joy welling up inside of him, he stood there, smiling at her as his tail flicked back and forth. As the minutes slowly rolled by, joy turned to confusion. Stepping forward, he nudged her chest with a hoof. Nothing happened except for her swaying back and forth. He nudged her again, harder this time, but received the same response. Nothing. She just sat there, unresponsive. Placing an ear to her chest, he listened closely, but couldn't pick up any noise. No pulse. Nothing. Brow crinkling with worry, he turned his attention to the dozens of papers tacked to the walls. Pulling them from the wall one by one, he scoured their contents for any clues as to what step he might have missed. However, none of the information on the pages held any useful tips. Trying to fight back the growing panic within his chest, he peeked around the mare. He breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing that the upper half of the hourglass still held a decent amount of sound in it. Sitting back on his haunches, he racked his brain, all while staring at the lifeless mare. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and a smile returned to his face. His horn glowed softly, and a golden aura surrounded the mare, lifting her into the air. Taking the utmost care, he maneuvered her until she was draped over his back, her head resting on his shoulder, her cheek pressed against his. After making sure she was situated and not about to slide off of his back, he slowly made his way over to the staircase running to the back wall of the room. Carefully, stepping over the piles of debris as to not jostle his passenger, he began to limp his way up the stairs, using his wings to help keep the mare in place. Reaching the top of the stairs, he pushed the door that was located there open, and stepped out into a much larger room. The room was circular, with shelves carved into the wooden surface. Thousands of books filled the shelves, many of them falling apart. A large picture of a sun had been printed on the ceiling. A paint chipped and faded. A table in the middle of the room held the large wooden bust of a pony. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, and there appeared to be moss growing around the corners of the ceiling and floors. Several of the dirty windows were cracked, fog wafting lazily in through the open holes. The muted sound of hooves filled the air as he moved further into the musty room. Glancing back at the mare, he gave his shoulder a little shake, trying to get her to open her eyes. All he succeeded in doing was causing her head to loll back and forth. Frowning, he tried again, adding a bit more bounce in his motion. Again, nothing happened. Tisking softly, he made his way around the room and up a secondary staircase that ascended to the ceiling. This led to a balcony hallway, with several rooms leading off of it. He ignored the first door, which had been boarded up tight. From between the wooden boards, he could just barely make out the shape of a loft with a bed on it through the gloom, an old wicker basket resting on the foot of a bed, a blanket draped over one end. A dark stain had formed around the basket, and there appeared to be a shapeless lump inside. The second room was boarded up as well, although with significantly more wood. Rose-colored runes covered the wood, which was chipped and covered in teeth marks, as if something had tried feverishly to get out. From what little he could see of the room, it was completely destroyed, with pieces of furniture strewn everywhere. There was a large mass collapsed in the center of the room, chains hanging off of it. White feathers were scattered across the floor, several of them poking out from beneath the wooden boards. It was the third room, the furthest from the stairs, that drew his attention. The door was unbarred, and he pushed it open with his nose. Poking his head inside, he glared around the bathroom, eyeing it carefully. There was no real damage to the room. A couple of cracks in the wall and, as well as one of the toilet. Grime covered the floor, making it slippery. He ignored all that, however, facing solely to the large tub. Carefully walking over to it, he glanced inside, noting that it was fairly clean. Letting up his horn, he lifted the mare from his back and placed her gently into the tub, with her head underneath the faucet. With her promptly and properly situated, he turned the handle a sliver, causing water to begin to drip down onto her head. Ignoring the grime, he sat down on the bathroom floor, his bad leg jutting out at an odd angle. He watched as the water dripped onto her face, before the light of his horn created a small field of magic in the path of the drips. As the water fell, though, the magic siphoned out the rust and grime. The fur between her eyes slowly became matted as the water continued to drip. She didn't stir. Her body remained in a limp heap on the floor of the tub, even as water began to stream down her face. Regardless, he let the water continue to dribble. He sat there, watching the mare with a small smile on his face as the water continued to leak. In the basement, the sand continued to fall.